So now, like I said, this is now a walkthrough of Nagios Xi's features and capabilities. It's going to be a split speaker. Seamus Demarais is going to do the first part. Sam Lansing is going to do the second part. So give him your undivided attention. We'll do a Q&A at the end. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, Mike, and thanks for joining us this morning, everybody. As Mike said, I'm Seamus Demarais. I'm a sales tech at Nagios Enterprises, and Sam Lansing's with the support team. And so what we're going to be doing, just to avoid some of the potential pitfalls that could happen with actually running a live demo, is we're going to be using a recording from an earlier webinar that we'd recorded, and just kind of going through the video and explaining some of the cool features and parts of the XI interface. So starting out here, what we're looking at here is the Nagios XI home screen. So when you first log into the interface, this is what you're presented with. And looking here, you can see that there's a lot of information presented here, and this is fully customizable. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So this is your home screen, and we'll get the video going here so we can move along. Right out of the gate, one of the big points in development of Nagios XI was to make it very extensible, very customizable. And multi-tenancy is very strong in Nagios XI. It's really easy to manage your users. Here, for instance, we're looking at the notification preferences for the user we're logged in as, which is Nagios Admin, the super user. And you can see we can determine if notifications are enabled, specifically what types of notifications we're going to receive, host down, host recovery, same thing for services. So you can really fine-tune what you're notified about within the XI system, as well as the times that notifications are coming through, so that you're not always getting notifications, but potentially at times when you're not even there to field them. So that it's really easy to modify all of that. There's multiple notification methods right out of the box built into Nagios XI. There's email, which you can see here, mobile text, and there's a bunch of popular carriers built in. You can implement additional carriers as well. Using the Multitech ISMS out-of-band GSM modem, you can actually send alerts even if your local internet connectivity goes down using a mobile network, which can be really useful as a failover mechanism. If Nagios can't send messages out, then nobody knows anything's going wrong. So that's integrated as well. And you can also integrate into an RSS feed, which is really useful. And then notification messages are fully customizable on a per-user basis as well. So you can fine-tune what information the user's receiving when the notification goes out. And here we're looking at email notifications. There's some built-in macros that would display pertinent information based on what the alert was and what it was relating to, built right into Nagios XI. And so in these text boxes, you can actually customize the information that's going out when the email alert occurs. And so here we can modify the title if necessary, change the other information that's coming in, all very quickly and easily through the XI interface. There's also mobile text, as we saw, and SMS. And for mobile text, of course, you'd probably want that to be a shorter message, a smaller message, so that it can fit within the context of a text message. So that's also fully customizable. And you can see here there's also SMS, and then RSS is customizable as well. So it's really easy to manage the notification messages that are going out, the types of notifications that are being received. We've got some homepage options here, which I talked about right out of the gate. Here's where you could determine what your homepage was showing. And you can make it a custom URL. You can basically show anything within that frame that you'd like to. Or you can use a home dashboard where you're customizing this dashboard with various dashlets and so on and so forth to show exactly what you want to see when you log in. And so here we're looking at views, and views can be rotated at a speed of your choice. There's some great built-in views right out of the box, and they're very easy to add. It's basically any URL, whether it's from within the Nagios XI system or an external URL. It's very easy to add them. Within Nagios XI, I hate to bring up that pop-up, but I want to point to it. Oh, now we're at a full screen. Okay, so this is a host status view, and what we were just showing there was actually giving yourself some more screen real estate by full screening that particular view. And moving on to dashboards, these are more do-it-yourself. They're really customizable. There's a few preset dashboards that are built in to show you important information. And you can also deploy dashboards to your users as an administrator. So you can create a dashboard, deploy it to various users, keep it synced so that they're seeing the right information and that the changes you make are carrying over. It's really easy to make new dashboards. And throughout the XI interface, you'll see items with the Dashify icon, which is a little blue square with a couple of blue dashes above it. And you click that, you add it to a dashboard, you can move them around on the dashboard, lock them into place, and basically order things exactly how you want to, and then either look at them just as a dashboard, make one of them your home page, or add them to your views so that this custom dashboard you've created is now part of your views rotation. So that's very useful. Here we're looking at a couple of various visualizations and then a list of the available dashlets. It's a really comprehensive list. There's a lot built right in. And as you bounce around the XI interface, you do see a lot of items with the Dashify icon that you can add to your dashboards. And then here we're basically just selecting one and adding it to a dashboard, defining a couple of custom things like the size, for instance, and the title. And here's another example of a great dashboard showing some really useful information, like various host groups. We've got a graph. So some really useful information. It's a great way to see exactly what's most important to you. And this is really cool. This is showing actually a Graph Explorer, which is a really cool component in Nagios XI. And you can basically drill down into this and look at the load average for 1 minute, 5 minute, 15 minute. You can remove various portions of the load just by clicking on the various colors to remove those. And then here's actually the dashboard deployment where you deploy your dashboard to users. And you can see it's really easy. You just select the user that you want to deploy the particular dashboard to. At first you select your dashboard. You can select whether or not to keep it synced so that the changes you make will carry over to your users. And then you just pick which users you want to deploy the dashboard to. So it's a very, very quick and easy to make sure that kind of a uniform information is available to all of the various users within the XI system as an administrator. So that's a very, very useful feature, especially if you have a lot of users, you have a large environment. That way everybody can be on the same page and always have the same information. There's a bunch of reports built into Nagios XI as well. Very useful insight into what's going on with your hosts and services over periods of time. XI is collecting historical data and performance data, and with your reports you can actually leverage the performance data or the historical status data. And like here's our host group availability, and you can see if you look at the top here, you can actually, oh, there goes. Got to get quicker with that pause button. Here we're adding a new report, and it's very easy to do. And we're just entering the title here. And we'll save our report. And now we've got this listed in My Reports. And I want to pause real quick because I want to explain that. What happened there is at the very top, you can customize the time period you're reporting on, limit it to specific hosts, host groups, service groups, or define a custom date range rather than using one of the defaults. Once you've done that, you can save the report to always show you that particular time. So we could do always show a report for the last 24 hours or the last week, the last month. And once you save that to My Reports and go to that report, that's the information that you'd see for that time period. So that's what was happening there. Here's a host group availability, and here we're demonstrating how to make those selections. It's very quick and easy to do. And let's see where we go. Perfect. Okay, so on the upper right, this is actually where you can export your report. All of the reports can be exported as a PDF. Many can be exported as a CSV. You can email them directly from the interface, as is being demonstrated here. You just decide what type of attachment, who it's going to, and so on and so forth. In Nagios XI Enterprise, you can also schedule reports to go out on a schedule of your choosing. So you select which report, you select when you want it to go out, which is all very easy to do through the interface, and then how you want it to be exported. So a great example would be sending an executive summary to a manager every Monday morning. And we'll take a look at some of the more specific reports here in a second. So here's just a listing of our scheduled reports, and the new one that we've added is visible right there. And you can also send it now if you'd like to send one immediately rather than letting it go out on its regular schedule. And here's host group availability again. And now we're going to look at some of the specific reports. Here's the executive summary, which actually leverages some of the other reports that are built in and consolidates them into one overview. We've got availability, top alert producers, an alert histogram, latest alerts, all built into a single report that gives you a really good overhead view of what's going on within your infrastructure. And so here we're defining a custom date range and determining the exact dates that we want to report on rather than using one of the defaults. Availability is an excellent high-level report for average host and service availability. It'll show you, hosts, whether they were up or down, services, if they were okay, warning, unknown, or critical, and just a nice pie chart of those percentages. And then here we've got host group availability, and we've got some other information going on. I'm not sure where we jumped to, but we'll keep going. You'll have to excuse me if there's any hiccups. We kind of planned all this at the last minute. But hopefully we can give you some useful, relevant information. Here's top alert producers. Very useful report. And what we were showing there is clicking through from the directory of top alert producers to a specific list. So we're back to top alert producers here. And it's basically the problem children. It's the hosts and services that are creating the most alerts. And it's a great way to identify which ones are causing the most problems so that you can resolve those. Here's state history, basically just a historical tale of the tape of the various states being reported by hosts and services, hard and soft state type changes, and whether they were warning, okay, or critical, just in a historical tale of the tape. So state history is very useful. Alert histogram is great. It just shows you the total volume of alerts happening for everything or for specific hosts, host groups, and so on over a period of time. So we've got time from left to right on the histogram, and we just see kind of the quantity of alerts that were happening. Another great way to pinpoint problem times of day, for instance. And notifications, just the notifications going out from the system. Another useful insight into the things that are happening within Nagios XI. And the context that they were sent to, so you can look here and very quickly see exactly who the notification went to and who was responsible for fielding whatever was occurring. And let's jump ahead just a little bit. All right, and our event log. Just an event log of all the system events happening within XI and the core engine. Showing here, just highlighting that a service event handler was run. And so again, a great tale of the tape just to see what was going on and kind of the chronology of what was happening within the system. And bandwidth, this one's great. This one's very popular, very useful. When you're monitoring a switch or a router in Nagios XI, it's collecting all of this data on bandwidth in and out for each port. And with this report, you can actually see visually for the last day, the last week, the last month, and the last year, what this bandwidth in and out was for each port individually. And we skip past it, but on the upper right, you'd see the port drop down. You select the port. You can look here and see a ready-made graph. You don't have to do anything but configure it with the network switch and router wizard, and it's all happening. So it's collecting the data. You can report. Capacity planning is also new in XI 2012. This is an enterprise feature, and it basically allows you to use historical data collected by the system to project future usage. And so what we're doing is selecting, refining it to a specific service, and then selecting the period of time of existing data we want to use. And here we're doing 16 weeks. In the middle is the extrapolation method. So that's the algorithm that'll be run to determine future usage. And then we decide how far out we want to extrapolate. And in this case, we're going to do 16 weeks prior. And drum roll, please, 64 weeks out. And then we'll calculate. And visually, we can see what's going to happen. And it's a great way to do capacity planning, to plan for what's going to happen in the future based on the information that you've already collected within Nagios. And you'll see exact numbers. Looks like we'll be using about 11.5 gig on the root partition on localhost at this date, Thursday, March 6, 2014. So it's really useful. It's a super cool tool. There are multiple extrapolation methods, so there's 4 different ways that you can project the data out. My understanding is that Holt-Winters is probably the most commonly used, but there are benefits to the other ones as well. So capacity planning is great. There's also some visualizations built into Nagios XI, and the alert heat map is one of them, and this is just showing alerts that were occurring, events that were occurring over a timeline. So we've got earlier on the left and more recently on the right, and if you see a horizontal line, such as this one, that means that a particular service was having trouble over a long period of time. If you were to see a vertical line, that would mean that a lot of problems were happening all at once within the system. And then here we've actually clicked through from that to some specific information about the items that were having trouble. Alert stream is another cool visualization where you can just very quickly visually see problems that were occurring and highlight the various hosts, click through very quickly to more information about them. And so that's the alert stream. And we've also got a network replay, which is really cool. I think network replay is great. And we'll be there in a second. So basically, as you're defining parent-child relationships within Nagios XI, and I apologize, we skipped that. I'm just going to explain it quick. When you're defining parent-child relationships within Nagios XI, a map is being created, which is called the hypermap in Nagios XI. So basically, you're looking, if you're familiar with the network map in Nagios Core, it's kind of a variation of that that's showing all of these relationships and the statuses of the various devices. Network replay allows you to actually watch what was happening over time and how the impact of one host going down is affecting other hosts and services. It's actually really cool, and I apologize that that didn't show up. Here we're looking at an audit log, which is very useful for compliance, for instance. This is a tale of the tape more focused on user activity. So what were the users within the system doing? Who logged in when? What were they up to? Who was submitting commands to the subsystem? So this is very useful for audit compliance. Audit log would be very useful for that. And here we've got notification management. This is also an XI enterprise-only feature. And what it basically allows you to do is configure notification templates, where initially we were looking at, on a per-user basis, determining what's being shown in a notification. This is a way that you can actually configure notification templates to apply to many users at once very quickly. So instead of doing it on each individual user, you just say, everybody gets this new information, and click a couple of boxes, and there it goes. So really useful, again, for a larger environment. A lot of the enterprise features are geared more towards people with a lot of hosts and services and users, but some of them can be extremely useful even for a small environment. And here we're just, again, making some changes to the notification template, applying them to various users. Same exact features that you'd see on a per-user basis. We've got our options, email, mobile text, so on and so forth. So it can all be modified the same way for many people at once. The extensibility of Nagios XI, as I'd said initially, what was really important right out of the gate was to make it extensible, customizable. And down on the bottom left, system extensions, we can manage components, dashlets, config wizards, plugins, SNMP, MIBs. All of these can be managed very quickly and easily through the XI interface. And so here we're demonstrating just grabbing a new plugin, bringing it into XI. So it's all really quick and easy to do. And here's the Nagios Exchange community site. A great place to go. Most of you are probably familiar with it. But if you haven't been there, check it out. It's exchange.nagios.org. Thousands of plugins, over 4,000 projects. This is a little bit old. We're showing 3740, but it's well over 4,000 now. And these are a variety of projects that can help you extend the capabilities of Nagios as far as what it can monitor and what it can do. And plugins are definitely the most popular part of Exchange. That's what the system would run to return metrics and figure out what the status of your hosts and services that you're monitoring are. So there's many of them there, and they're super easy to integrate into Nagios XI. And you can also, it's searchable. So here we're just doing a quick search for JBoss. And as you'll be able to see, there's plenty of results. It's very easy to find what you're looking for. Another great thing about Nagios in general is that you can write custom plugins. So if there's a less common device or something proprietary that you're working with, you can write plugins to check it using simple guidelines that are widely available. So you can just say, I need to monitor this thing. How do I do it? I'll write a plugin. They can be bash shell scripts. They can be written in a variety of programming languages. So that's one of the awesome things about Nagios in general, and does apply to XI as well as Core. And so here I think, all right, we're back. And so here we're back at managing components. And as I had said, you can also manage dashlets, config wizards, plugins, MIBs. And components basically are things within Nagios XI that are impacting the interface in some way. There's a ton of components preloaded, and you can also write custom components. And so those are very useful, and the wizards are what you use to monitor. And Sam will actually explain more about the wizards and how they work and what that step-by-step is in just a couple of minutes. So here we're just scrolling through a list of the various components already built into the system. And you can see there's a ton already in there that do a bunch of useful things. Like the bandwidth usage report, for example, that's a component. Bulk modification tools, capacity planning. So they can be added and removed very quickly and easily using the interface. So now I'm just going to, excuse me a second, I'm going to skip ahead. We've got a lot to cover and not a ton of time. This was actually pretty cool. This is just a quick scroll through all of the wizards that are built in. As you can see, it's very comprehensive. Now we're back at our home page, and on the home menu, there's a ton of stuff to do. If you look on the left here in the sub-menu, you can see that there are a ton of options. Some might be familiar to core users, like Tactical Overview, for instance. Just an excellent bird's eye view of the health of your network as a whole, your hosts, your services, what amount of them are up and down and having problems. So Tactical Overview is very useful in that respect, and as you can see, these all have the Dashify icon, so they can be integrated into custom dashboards just with a click. You just click the icon, tell it where you want it to go, and that's it. Very easy to do. So there's our Tactical Overview. We'll skip ahead a little bit here. And I think one thing I want to point out too is that you can click through on these as well to get more detailed information about these specific items and these specific statuses. And so that's what we're doing here. So we've clicked through to all the services with a critical status, so we can scroll through the list, we can see each service, and we can click through once again to go to the detail of that specific service. Here's the Operations Center, another useful way to get some great information about what's up and what's down overall. And looks like we've full screened that one just so you can see how easy it is to fill up a screen and get a really good look at all of these items. And scrolling down that list. All right. Not certain where we're going here. Once again, I apologize for any hiccups. Here we've got, looks like open service problems coming up. So this is all of the unacknowledged service problems within the system. Looks like we've got a bunch of critical services here. And clicking through, this is the service status detail. And I want to highlight this just a little bit. It's very easy to get to for all of your, there's a host service detail and a service status detail. And you can see you've got a lot of useful information here. You've got what the status is, some quick actions on the right where you can actually disable, enable notifications, schedule immediate checks. You've also got some tabs where you can look at, if this were a host, we'd click performance graphs and we could see graphs for all of the services. For a service, we've basically got a graph for the service specifically. You can also configure, and there's a notes tab where you can add custom notes like, say, the serial number of the device, so some unique identifier that you want to be within the system and easily accessible by users. So that's our service status detail. All right. Keep zipping along here. And we did just make a system change there using the service status detail, and that's what was being demonstrated. And then if you look down on the bottom, you can see this has been acknowledged. The administrator saying, I acknowledged it, I'm working on this problem. And you'll actually see those comments in the service status detail. So it's really quick to find out what the status is and who's working on what and how it's going. So moving along. And so we've got open service, we've got all service, all host problems, so on and so forth. We can also search. So there's a quick find. If you're looking for, say, Scott's server in this example, you can just do a quick search, click go, and boom, we're looking at Scott's server, that specific host, and all of its services. So you don't have to necessarily look at just a whole list. You can very quickly filter it down to the specific pieces of information that you're looking for. As he's showing here, you can view performance graphs for the various services just by clicking on, it's covered up. Oh, it's covered up. I'm going to be ready this time. That thing. All right, and so we're back in the service status detail. We can see the plugin output here and that everything is okay. And we'll keep going. Scheduling an immediate check, that's also useful if you've resolved an issue and don't want to wait for the system's regularly scheduled check to kick in. You can just schedule an immediate check and find out the status. It'll basically schedule that to be the next check that the system runs. Here's a basic performance graph that we've gotten to from the service status detail. And we can also, as you're looking at on the right, you can modify the standard periods. You can enter custom periods to do this graph on. So it's really quick and easy to see great visualizations of the information that the system is collecting. And let's keep moving here. Oh, and here's some advanced. This is actually really useful too. You can see that you can actually modify some stuff on the right here. Active checks, passive checks, notifications, flap detection. All of that can be modified just by clicking here. And you've got a lot more detailed information. You can schedule downtime right through this. which is important. And here we're just kind of demonstrating what the scheduled downtime looks like. You can also reconfigure basic things about this, such as the most common things that you'd change, like the check interval, notification contacts and contact groups that alerts are going to go out to. All of that can be configured very quickly and easily through the status details. There's some things you can't change there that you need to go to the core config manager, the advanced configuration GUI to change. But there's the most common things you need to do are possible right from there. So, and here we're just looking at a couple of the status summaries that are possible. Here we've got our host group summary, and there's also a service group summary. So all our host groups, all our service groups, we can very quickly see how many of those particular types of device are in what kind of status right here with this summary. And again, they all have the Dashify icons, so they can be added to dashboards. Each of the individual elements can be added to a dashboard if you're choosing at any time. And here's just some kind of an inside look at these. And then I'm not sure if we're going to click through. All right. But you can click through on those to more detailed information. And here we're just removing the dashboard. All right. BPI, Business Process Intelligence, also built in Nagios XI, allows you to group sets of hosts and services into processes that you're intelligently alerted on based on the state of that whole process. So if you had like 10 web servers and 7 needed to be running for your users to see the information that they're supposed to, you'd be alerted if 7 or less were having problems, or 7 or more were having problems. So it's basically alerting on the percentage of health of the process. You can also define critical members. So if server A goes down, you definitely want an alert. But as long as at least 7 of the 10 other servers are running, you're not getting an alert. Really useful for a lot of different purposes. With XI Enterprise, automatic host group and service group synchronization has been built in as well. So it's super cool. You're nodding your head. You've probably seen how easy it is just to click and poof, they're all right there. So that's also a really cool feature. And here we're just looking at some more in-depth look into BPI and setting it all up. And here you've got health thresholds for warning and critical. So basically we're just saying here, at 50%, we're at a warning. At 75%, we're at a critical for group health. So the health of the whole process and all of the various hosts and services that it encompasses. So BPI is very useful. And we'll keep going here. And this is just a good look at a BPI group. I will pause it for a second. Anywhere you see an asterisk, that means that's a critical member, where if that goes down, we're getting an alert no matter what, regardless of the state, the health of the group. All right. All right, so Graph Explorer, another really cool component. Some really cool looking visualizations, for instance, top alert producers, a host health pie chart. Same thing for service health, another pie chart that'll also give you the various statuses. Scalable performance graphs. I'm certain that we will drop down to something more interesting. There we go. So what this is showing is so blue is the 1 minute load average, green is the 5 minute, and red is the 15. And what we can actually do is very easily zoom in to a smaller chunk of time and also remove whole pieces. So now we're just looking at the 5 minute and the 15 minute load average on localhost. You can also define the time period that you're looking at this particular graph for. You can customize that, and here we've actually selected a 30-day time frame, and it must have worked. There we go. So now we've got a much bigger chunk of time that we're seeing data on, and again, we can zoom into particular times. We can add and remove very quickly and easily. And there we go. We kind of zoomed in, and we can look at the peaks, we can look at the valleys, and get exact numbers just by hovering over them. So Graph Explorer, very cool tool. And the time stack performance graphs are basically showing you periods of time in relation to one another. So here, blue would be a day ago till now, green would be 2 days ago till a day ago, and red would be 3 days ago until 2 days ago. And we can do the same thing. We can add and remove time frames. And so really you can see over a period of multiple days how events for that particular service relate to one another. So it's another way to kind of do some logical correlation and see potentially what times of day problems are occurring most often. And there we go. So now we're looking at a 3-month period of time. And I'll fast forward a little bit here. So now some of the maps. BB map is cool. So in the left-hand column, we've got hosts, and then the whole rest of the BB map is basically a list of every service within the system and the statuses of the items that relate to each host on the left for those various services. So in this particular setup, there are a ton of services. So BB map, it covers multiple screen links. Here's the Google Maps integration component. This is built right in. You can use geo-coordinates to have active icons over your various regions and show you statuses. So really cool visualization, pretty easy to use, and that's built right into Nagios XI. You can also hover over and get more information about those particular items. And also click through to a host status detail right from the Google Map. Hypermap, I mentioned earlier. This was the network replay component that I talked about. So this would be just the static map itself using the parent-child relationships you've defined to show you a map of network topography. And also with colors indicating the statuses so you know what's having trouble and what's okay. And it's just nice to get an overhead view of the relationship between everything. And as you saw, you can hover over the various icons and get more information about those items. All right. And this is just demonstrating that you can zoom in and out and rearrange. Mind map, kind of like BB map, only simpler because it's not actually listing at the top the names of the services. So for an environment with a ton of different services, this would be a really good way to see it all in a more palatable way, where you're looking at it here and you can see the icons. You can also hover over them to see what they're actually relating to. So it's not just blind, you can see that. Latest alerts is also in the home menu, just showing all of the latest alerts and acknowledgments. And some of these items we did see earlier. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. And I would imagine, here we go. Scheduled downtime, also very useful. Of course, there are going to be times when you know that a chunk of your infrastructure is going to be down. Scheduled downtime allows you to tell the system that, so it's not going to kick out a bunch of alerts for things that you know are going to be down anyway. You can also set up recurring downtime. So it's scheduled to happen every Tuesday night at 10 p.m. It's going to go till Wednesday morning at 2 a.m. and you're just not going to get alerts for the things that you tell it not to alert on because you know they'll be down for a maintenance window or something like that. And it's really easy to configure. Here we're just selecting the host that we've associated with that schedule and giving it a start time, telling the system how long we want that to go, which days of the week that's going to happen, or which days of the month that's going to happen. So it's really easy to automatically prevent a bunch of alerts that wouldn't do you a lot of good. And we'll jump ahead. And here we're just selecting valid days of the month. And we've also got notifications. All right. So now we are at our, we're at configuration. And actually, Sam Lansing is going to take over at this point and walk us through some of the wizards, auto discovery, and stuff like that. So thanks for bearing with me so far, and we'll have Sam up in just a second.
Alrighty, can everybody hear me? Alrighty, excellent. So as Seamus said, I'm Sam Lansing. I'm one of our tech support specialists. I'm not going to go too deep into my intro because we have some stuff we need to cover here before we run out of time. So right now, up until this point, you've seen kind of an introduction to the majority of the interface itself, so where you're going to get a lot of your monitoring information from for your hosts and services. Excuse me. So we're going to go sort of into configuration here. Right away, we're going to the Auto Discovery Wizard. The Auto Discovery Wizard was built in Nagios XI because we needed a good way for people to be able to map their entire network or portions of their network all at once. So what we're doing with the Auto Discovery Wizard is we're actually running an Nmap scan of your network. And as you can see up here, we can block off certain portions, so IP address ranges for your network. The reason for that is because Nmap scans, if you've ran them, they can take quite some time if you do have a large network. So it's nice to be able to block that up. So here we're just setting the range. We're setting a schedule as well, so we can tell Nagios XI to rerun auto-discovery jobs multiple times. And then we can also enable OS detection, which is one of the Nmap options as well. So if we had a Windows 7 server or a Linux server, we could tell Nagios to also place that in there once we get the auto-discovery back. So here we've got a list of previously ran jobs. I believe we're going to click through to one of them here so I can kind of explain what we're seeing. All right, here we go. So once an auto-discovery job completes, you're going to get a list of all of your host addresses, so all of the systems that the Nmap scan could contact. And it's also going to pull up a list of some of the top ports that you commonly want to monitor. Just basic ports such as HTTP for any Apache that you might be using, or any web hosting, stuff like that. For instance, also the NRPE port here, which is port 566. And that's what we use for all of our NRPE checks. It doesn't look like we had OS scanning turned on for this specific example here. We're just going to move through here. And I believe we're going to go back. Okay. Now, once you've kind of checked and chosen specific hosts that you want to add from the wizard, you're going to come to this page, which is where you're actually going to configure them into Nagios XI. So if you were here for my talk yesterday, getting started with Nagios Core XI and Fusion, I did show you kind of how the configuration wizards work, and we're going to go into that here once more. So once we've selected all those options, we're going to skip ahead here. Okay. And it looks like I passed the configuration portion. It's very simple. You're just going to click Next on that page, and it's going to ask you and tell you that it's going to configure all of these hosts that it found in these services or these ports into hosts and services themselves. So here we have our list of all of our configuration wizards that are built in Nagios XI currently. We're going to scroll through here because the video kind of goes slowly through it. So we have tons of wizards here, anything from MS SQL wizards. We've got a variety of those, MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, just basic TCP checks against ports. We've got our network switch and router wizard, which we're going to run through here. Various Windows and Linux wizards. So really what we're doing with wizards is, as opposed to manually configuring your hosts and services through the core configuration manager, this provides a really easy step-by-step process to walk you through setting up your hosts and services. And the wizards do have some basic metrics that one might want to use for monitoring on those devices. So for instance, for Windows, if we get to it here, we have things such as memory, CPU, uptime. We can monitor specific services and processes on the Windows system. And here we're into the network switch and router monitoring wizard. This is one of my personal favorites because it's great if you've got large network devices that you need to monitor in your environment. What we're doing here is we're setting the IP address or the address of the switch or router. In this case, it's a switch. We're going to be setting our SNMP community string here. Choosing our SNMP version. And also the vendor for the switch. If we do not know the vendor or if it's not listed here, we can just leave it as unknown or other. And then we choose our port naming scheme. So for instance, if you have a Cisco switch that allows you to define specific names for your ports on the switch itself, Nagios XI, what we're doing with this wizard here is we're actually running an SNMP scan of the device, and we can actually pull in that information. So if you've got ports named for your devices that are already plugged into them or that they're being used on, you can pull that dynamically into Nagios XI here. So we're going to skip ahead here. And we should be able to show you this. We should run a scan in this video, kind of show you what the output will look like. Okay, so here we go. So once Nagios has ran the scan, and it's quite quick It depends on obviously the size of your interface. But we're going to get a full list of all the ports in this switch. If we were pulling in the port name, so for instance, if I named this one Sam's Windows Server because I have my workstation plugged into it, that would come through up here. We can see the max speed of those interfaces. And then we can also define our bandwidth checks. So each of these ports is actually going to be a service in Nagios XI. And then we're just doing a standard ping check as well. So we can see if those ports are up and down, and we can also see the average bandwidth that they are using. We can actually set our warning and critical thresholds for our in and out bandwidth here. So as you see on the far left, let me see if I can mouse over it here, the far right. Right now we're using, just checking megabytes per second. Now we can bump that to gigabytes, kilobytes, anything like that. Many of the major speeds we can set there. Now let me skip forward here. We've got a few minutes left. I'm just going to go through the basic steps of a configuration wizard just so I make sure to get this out. So once we run through and we select all the metrics for our wizard, so all of our services that we're going to be adding in, we go to step 4. Now step 4 is where we define how often we want to check these services in this host and what happens if they go into a trouble state. So by default, Nagios checks all of its hosts and services every 5 minutes. Now if it goes into a trouble state, Nagios will switch from checking that to every 1 minute 5 times before it goes into a hard state or generates a hard state alert. And then step 5 here is where we actually select what we want to do once that alert is deemed to be sent out. So by default, Nagios will send a notification immediately. You can set up waiting periods depending on what devices you're checking. You can also tell Nagios not to send notifications. You can set up a delay, as I'd mentioned there. And then you can also tell Nagios to send out a notification for these devices on a kind of sort of cron basis here. Then down below, we select our contacts that we want to send these notifications to. Now that's, of course, if we are using contacts. Depending on how you want to be notified, you're either using contacts or users themselves. So there are 2 different methods that we didn't really touch on here. That's a little bit more of an advanced feature, but if you have questions, I'd be glad to answer those after. Based on that, we're skipping ahead here. Now in step 6, this is where we actually define if we want to add this host to a host group or not. As you'll see here, I think we're going to scroll through and we're going to find our switches host group. I generally recommend to add as many hosts to a host group as possible. It just makes managing a lot easier, especially if you have a lot of devices that you're monitoring. And then we can also define our parent host down below here. So typically what we see for that scenario is if you've got, for instance, a firewall between this switch or a Windows server and Nagios, so a firewall is an intermediary, or even a switch, anything like that. If that device in the middle, so the parent goes down, this host and its services will automatically go to an unknown state rather than a critical. Because if there's no way for us to route our check to that device, it will go into a critical state naturally. So I tend to recommend if you've got devices in between their network devices, I would use those as parent hosts. Because you actually don't know if this host and its services are down. It might just be unreachable. All right, so we finished the configuration here through this wizard. Now, Nagios is applying configuration, so it's basically taking the configuration that we built, and it's verifying it, making sure that everything that Nagios requires to monitor it is present. So check intervals, check commands, stuff such as that are required by Nagios. Now, once this is complete here, this process, you'll sometimes notice on the top here our system status that will go into a red state, at least for the first icon there. That's basically some of the really top level system things, such as the Nagios process itself. Performance graphing is in there as well. That's because Nagios has to restart once you run through any configuration changes. So for those configurations to take effect, Nagios does have to restart. So I wouldn't be worried about that. We have a lot of questions on that now and then, but not a big deal. And they'll come back to normal here as well, so probably once we refresh the page. Now we're just looking at our configuration that we just completed. So when you're done running an apply configuration on hosts or services, you have a link that allows you to go directly in and see the hosted services. So by default, once you first set up these devices, they will be in a pending state. That's because Nagios hasn't actually completed a check or received a check yet. We can tell Nagios, though, to set default statuses, but I recommend just leave it as it is because we don't want Nagios to say it's an okay state when it's really not. We don't know for sure until those checks come back. So, did you? Oh, a minute. Okay. All right. Let's skip ahead here and see what we've got a little further on. Okay, I do want to go over this tool. This is very popular. This is the bulk host cloning and import wizard. So what we're doing here is we're selecting one of our existing hosts from our interface from Nagios XI itself. When we click next here, it's going to populate a list of the services underneath that host, as you can see here on the left. So the Scott server has all these services underneath it. Now what we can do here is we can actually select these individual services. And for instance, if we've got another server that's set up just like Scott server, all we have to do is go down here and enter the IP address or the FQDN of that new server. And what we're doing in effect is cloning all the settings we have set up for Scott server onto these new servers. So it's quite easy for you to kind of push out mass servers. If you have one configured and you like how it's all set up, you can do this to multiple other addresses, and Nagios will automatically go out and configure all of that for you. Alrighty, so probably going to call it good there. I'm not sure not much is left in the video here, about 44 seconds. So does anybody have any questions for us?
Can you set the dashboard access based on LDAP users?
That, I'm not sure if that's a feature right now. We do have AD authentication within Nagios XI. So what we're basically doing, especially with the deploying dashboards portion, is we're just sending it to a user within Nagios XI. So if you do have users set up that have to authenticate through AD or LDAP, then yes, it will also affect them. So for instance, if we had set up our login page here for, I can't go back to it now. If we had set up our login page to require your LDAP authentication, so once you already set that all up, that's all before we get to dashboards. So it doesn't really matter if you have AD authentication or not on that, if that sort of makes sense.
Yes, but it's not exactly what I wanted. I wanted to limitate actually visibility of certain dashboards
Okay.
and to certain groups of users.
Okay. So you could sort of do that if you, I guess if you, they can still set up their own dashboards. If you select a certain amount of dashboards and then make sure you have it synced to yours, you can set up your own groups within the dashboards page for those users. So if you've got host availability dashboard and then you've got a home dashboard you want everyone to see within a certain group, you could keep that synced to how you have it set up and then push that change out to everyone else. So you can limit it from the Nagios admin account to those users in that fashion.
Thank you.
Two questions. First is what I like interested in with Nagios XI is the historical data, because currently in core what I do is I just write a wrapper around some of our scripts to get the results stored in a shared database.
Okay.
So my question is how easy is it to get to that historical data in Nagios XI? So I could write a script like a CPU check for some of my customers. What they want is, over the last hour, has the CPU been above 80%? And if so, do the following
Sure.
actions.
So the majority of those reports all that day you're seeing is actually pulled from logs. So you could write a script to pull directly from those logs that Nagios uses, and you could get that granular information if you wanted to. If you want to get with me after here, I can pull it up on my laptop and I can kind of show you what I'm talking about. It's a little hard to explain without actually showing you, as a lot of this is, but.
Okay. Then my other question is for the dashboards with filtering. Like currently, like in one of our data centers, we have over 10,000 hosts and over 100,000 services. So checking the box for all the problems that listed takes forever to load. So in the dashboards, if I were to set up several different types of filters to say, like in the last hour, show me all the problems, is that available? And how long would that take when you have a large environment like that?
That's not currently something we have in sort of a dashlet format. What you could do, let's see. You could pull up, say, one of the reports pages, and you can make a view of that, and you could maybe use a view instead of a dashboard. That would be one way to do it. We don't have a dashlet really that we can tune down to a specific, like a time basis, like between this and this period, we want to see what's happened. That's sort of more of a report side of things, but that is a possibility too. That's a good idea.
All right. Thank you.
All right, we're going to allow one more question, and we got to allow time for people to get to the next session. So you had your hand up.
I hope this is valuable to everybody. I noticed that you use a lot of reds and greens in your interface. Is there something inside of Nagios where you can change the color scheme globally to support people who are colorblind? Or is it all basically inside like a CSS definitions and where it can be changed that way?
We have changed that for people before. If you want to either email myself or one of the people on the support team, contact us on our forums. We can show you how to do that. It has been done before, so.
All right, I'd love to give you guys more chance to answer questions. I'm usually begging for questions, but we have about 7 minutes to get to our next session. So how about a nice round of applause for Seamus and for Sam.